On Christmas Eve, I came home without announcing it. I saw my daughter shivering outside in the freezing night when the temperature was only 32 degrees Fahrenheit without even a coat. Meanwhile, her in-laws were sitting by the fireplace, raising their glasses of sparkling wine to celebrate. I threw the door open, lifted my daughter into my arms, and said 7 words. It's good that you are here. And tell me in the comments where you are listening to this revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I stepped out of the taxi. My heavy shoes sank into the thick snow in front of my daughter's house in Aspen, Colorado. The icy wind whipped my face like it wanted to tear my skin, forcing me to pull my coat collar tighter. After so many years as a Taekwondo coach, I thought I was used to all kinds of challenges, from the suffocating heat of the training mats to the harshest winters. But that Christmas Eve cold still made me shiver. I stood in front of the brightly lit house, my heart filled with a storm of emotion and worry. Tonight, I wanted to surprise Emily, my daughter. I wanted to see her radiant smile when her mother appeared after so many months apart. The garden was covered in snow, not a footprint in sight, as if no one had bothered to clear it. Through the large window, I saw warm light spilling from the living room, where Christmas music played from the speakers. The song, Silent Night, which Emily had loved as a child, filled the air. I moved closer, trying to peer inside. A long table draped in a bright red cloth was piled with traditional holiday dishes. There was roasted turkey, steaming bread pudding, a bowl of chicken salad mixed with apples and raisins, and glasses of red wine sparkling under the lights. The Carter family, Emily's in-laws, were gathered together. I recognized Richard, Mark's father, with his commanding presence, and Susan, his mother, raising her glass with a proud smile. Even Isabel, Mark's sister, was there with her 2 little ones, laughing loudly. I frowned, straining to see more, hoping to spot her somewhere in the room. In my mind, I pictured Emily's cheerful laughter, the way she used to cling to my neck, telling me endless stories. But then I heard a faint sound, weak and trembling, like a whimper from the porch. I turned around, and my heart nearly stopped. Under the dim light, beside a snow-covered Christmas plant, Emily was curled up on an old wooden chair, wearing only a thin shirt. Her frail shoulders shook, her hair tangled with sweat and melted snow. I rushed to her side, my heart pounding. "Emily!" I cried, my voice breaking. I tore off my Taekwondo jacket and wrapped it around her. My trembling hands touched her arm. It was ice cold, as if no warmth remained. Emily lifted her head, her eyes red, her lips pale, as she whispered, "Mom." Her voice was so weak it nearly dissolved into the air. She collapsed against my shoulder. I held her tightly, feeling her body shiver like a fragile bird caught in a blizzard. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here," I whispered, trying to stay calm even as my tears spilled over. I pulled out an old sweater from my bag, wrapping it around her in hopes of giving her more warmth. I carried her up, her soaked slippers slipping off and leaving wet stains on the snow. I held her close, feeling her faint breath against my neck. In that moment, the only thing I wanted was to take her away from the bitter cold, from the cruelty that had left her like this. But inside the house, laughter still rang out, heartless and distant. I could clearly hear Mark's arrogant voice boasting about something. The whole table erupted in laughter, the clinking of glasses sounding like a twisted song. They sat in comfort by the fire, while my daughter, my flesh and blood, was left shivering outside, as if she didn't deserve to be part of that home. Just a few hours earlier, I had been at Denver International Airport, my back still damp with sweat after a week of training with the national Taekwondo team. The heat from the mats seemed to cling to me. Even as I stood in the cool airport hall, I dragged my old suitcase, too restless to sit still, imagining Emily's face lighting up with joy at our Christmas Eve reunion. From the time she was little, Emily had always been my light, from clinging to my legs, begging for stories, to becoming a sweet young woman whose smile could erase the hardest days. But my job as head coach had carried me from one place to another, from New York to international tournaments, stealing away the time I should have spent with her. Every time I left, I told myself, just one more tournament, then I'll be with her. And now, here I was, hoping for a Christmas Eve reunion that would finally make her happy. While waiting in the terminal for my flight to Aspen, I picked up the phone to call Emily. I wanted to give her a heads up, to hear her voice, and make sure she was home. The ringtone went on, each second making me more uneasy. No one answered. I frowned, thinking maybe she was busy preparing dinner with the Carter family. I called again. Still nothing but silence. A knot of unease spread through my chest like ink bleeding across paper. I sent a message. Mom is coming. Are you home? I stared at the screen, waiting for the green dot to appear, but nothing came. I forced myself to push away the bad feeling, telling myself she must have left her phone somewhere, or maybe she was caught up decorating the tree like every other year. The plane landed in Aspen after dark. I pulled my suitcase through the terminal doors, and the winter wind immediately slapped against my skin. Families hugged, laughed, and prepared to head for midnight mass. A father carried his little girl on his shoulders, a child holding a lollipop shaped like a Christmas tree, laughing in pure delight. I looked at that scene, a knot tightening in my chest. I, too, had once carried Emily on my back, once held her hand as we walked together through streets glowing with Christmas lights. But now I was alone, dragging a heavy suitcase, stepping out of the airport with a loneliness I couldn't put into words. I called a taxi, my voice hoarse. Please take me to Aspen, Colorado. 245 Pinewood Street. The streets were jammed. People in thick coats and wool scarves walked in groups toward the church for Mass. I sat in the cab, staring out the window at the warm lights spilling from houses on both sides. Church bells echoed in the distance, blending with the choir singing, "O Holy Night." I smiled, picturing Emily busy in the kitchen, making the Christmas pudding she had learned from me. The car stopped at an intersection, and I suddenly noticed a few traffic police officers. I recognized Michael, one of my former students back when I taught Taekwondo at the City Sports Center. He was tall, standing firmly in his uniform, but still had that same gentle smile as before. I rolled the window down and called out loudly. He turned, his eyes lighting up as he recognized me. Michael ran over, his breath steaming in the cold. I smiled, hiding my weariness. That's right. I just finished a training session in New York. Are you still working in Aspen? How have you been? Michael nodded, his smile bright. Yes, I'm still here on the force. Are you back to spend Christmas with your family? I nodded, telling him I was here to see Emily. My heart warmed at the mention of my daughter. But then, Michael's face darkened, his smile fading. A flicker of doubt flashed in his eyes, like he wanted to say something but held back. A bad feeling flared up inside me, like a spark catching fire. What? Is it, Michael? Is something wrong? I asked quietly. He shook his head, forcing a smile. No, nothing at all, Coach. But the worry in his eyes was impossible to hide. I wanted to press further, but the traffic light turned green. The car pulled away, leaving Michael standing there, gripping the brim of his cap tightly. When the cab reached Emily and her husband's house, I told the driver to stop a little down the street. I wanted to surprise her, to see the look on her face when she opened the door to find her mother standing there. I dragged my suitcase along the snow-covered road, each step leaving deep prints. The golden glow from the surrounding houses shone like candles in the night. From a distance, I heard the sound of a guitar and singing drifting out from Emily's house. I smiled, imagining her singing, like when she was little and would stand beside me with her pure voice. I set my suitcase down on the porch steps, took a deep breath, and reached for the doorbell. But then, a burst of mocking laughter rang out from inside, sharp as a knife slicing through the air. I froze. My hand stopped midair. The deep, gruff voice of Richard Mark's father rang out clearly. "Is that what you call a daughter-in-law? A woman who can't even bear children, who's had 4 miscarriages. Hasn't she humiliated us enough already?" His heavy, contemptuous laughter echoed. Then Mark's voice cut in, cold and cruel. "She spends all day pretending to be depressed, locking herself in her room, doing nothing. If it weren't for my parents, I would have kicked her out long ago." The whole table erupted in laughter, glasses clinking together. Isabel, Mark's sister, added bitterly, "That's right. Completely useless. What good is a wife who can't give birth? She fakes being sick just to be pampered. Pathetic." Every word they spoke stabbed into my heart like a knife. I stood there, breath caught in my throat. They were treating Emily, my daughter, who once dreamed of a happy family, who cooked every meal with love for her husband, with nothing but humiliation. 4 miscarriages. Each time, she called me sobbing until her voice was raw, until no more tears could come. And now they dared to say she was faking it. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my skin. And then I saw Emily curled up on the porch, sitting on an old wooden chair, wearing only a thin shirt. Her head hung low, her whole body trembling in the biting cold. My eyes blurred with tears. My heart twisted. I rushed to lift her into my arms. Her body still shook, cold as ice. My own hands trembled not just from Aspen's bone-cutting winter night, but from the fury burning in my chest. Every step I took toward the Carters' front door felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. But I didn't stop. I pounded on the wooden door. The knocks thundered, louder than the Christmas music playing inside. The song Jingle Bells repeated, mocking the pain I had just witnessed. No one came. I ground my teeth and banged harder, as if I could knock the door down with sheer force. Finally, the door creaked open. Susan stood there, swirling a glass of red wine, her lips painted a glossy red under the light. The faint smell of alcohol lingered, but on her face was a forced smile trying to look polite. "Hello, Brenda. What a surprise to see you here," she said, in a sweet but fake tone, as if I were some uninvited guest. "Why didn't you let us know ahead of time so we could welcome you properly?" I stared straight into her eyes, not hiding my anger. If I had announced my visit, how could I have seen what was really happening? I roared, clutching Emily tighter in my arms, feeling her faint breath against my shoulder. Susan raised an eyebrow, glancing at Emily with disdain. She curled her lip. "Emily just went out for a little fresh air. Don't make such a fuss. It's Christmas. Come in. Don't stand outside." Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Out for a little fresh air, while my daughter was nearly frozen to death out there, wearing only a thin shirt. Before I could respond, Mark appeared behind his mother. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing a deliberate air of indifference. He held a bottle of wine, casting me a defiant glance. "Mom, close the door," he said arrogantly, his chin tilted high. "Let her stay out there and learn a lesson," he sneered. "Who shows up for dinner pretending to be weak just to avoid helping out?" I saw Isabel's 2 kids, my own grandchildren, run out to the porch. They looked at Emily in my arms and started giggling, whispering, "Aunt Emily's being punished." The innocence of a child's voice, but those words stung like salt on an open wound. My blood boiled. I braced my shoulder against the door and kicked it hard again. The door flew open with a loud crack, slamming against the wall and silencing the entire room. Wine in Susan's glass trembled and spilled, leaving a red stain on the expensive carpet. The Christmas music stopped abruptly, as if someone had shut off the speaker. The air inside grew suffocating, heavy, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. I stepped into the middle of the room, still holding Emily in my arms. Each step left a trail of melted snow on the wooden floor, marks of a fury that could not be erased. All eyes turned to me. Richard with his cold expression, Susan without her fake smile, Isabel glaring with contempt, and the whole family showing shock mixed with irritation. I could feel hostility in every gaze, but I didn't care. I laid Emily on the sofa and wrapped a scarf around her shoulders. Her hands were still cold, trembling as if the snow still clung to her. I knelt down, looking deep into her eyes, trying to pass her a little strength even though all I carried inside was rage and pain. The Carters' living room was still, brightly lit. The fireplace crackled, but the atmosphere was suffocating, like everyone was waiting for an explosion. Mark stepped forward, his face red with alcohol, his eyes shining with arrogance. He lowered his voice, cold yet full of conceit. "You don't have the right to make a scene in my house, Brenda." He stressed the words, "my house," as if to remind me that I was a stranger here, that I didn't belong. He adjusted his stance, one hand on his hip, his shirt half open, in a gesture of contempt. But in his eyes, I caught a flicker of unease. He knew I wasn't someone who could be bullied easily. I shot to my feet, pointing directly at him, my voice shaking with fury. "No right? And you? Do you have the right to throw my daughter out into the freezing cold, to nearly let her freeze to death? You call that being a husband? You call that being a family?" I looked around the dining table, the dishes still steaming, the wine glasses glimmering as if all of it were mocking Emily's suffering. Richard slowly rose from the head of the table, adjusting his suit, his deep voice carrying an air of authority. "Enough, Brenda. This is a family matter. A woman who cannot bear children must learn to endure. That is tradition." His words fell like a hammer, cold and merciless. I stared straight into his eyes and saw the arrogance of a man accustomed to power. But tonight, he had chosen the wrong opponent. I glanced back at the dining table, where the turkey still filled the air with its aroma, where the pudding was neatly arranged, where the wine sparkled under the lights. Then I turned to Emily, still trembling on the sofa, her stomach growling faintly like a silent accusation. I couldn't hold back any longer. My voice rang out, sharp and fierce. "This is how you feast, while my daughter is left outside with no coat, no food, in the freezing cold? You call that tradition? You call that humanity?" Susan shrugged with a cold smile, as if I were exaggerating. "A trivial matter. A woman who can't have children feeding her is nothing but a waste, Brenda." She sipped her wine, as if to show she couldn't care less about my or Emily's feelings. Isabel chimed in with a bitter voice, pouring salt on the wound. "Your daughter always uses depression as an excuse to avoid doing anything. Has she ever prepared a proper meal for the family this entire year? All she does is lie in bed, complain, and burden everyone else." The relatives around the table began whispering. Some shook their heads. Others sneered, agreeing with those cruel words. Every laugh, every sideways glance felt like a knife stabbing into my heart. All I wanted was to flip that lavish dining table and demand justice for my daughter. But then, a weak voice rose from the sofa. Emily had woken up. She tried to sit up, her trembling hands clutching the edge of the seat, her voice faint and choked as if she were about to pass out. "I'm so tired. No one understands me." But her words were immediately drowned out by Mark's shout. "Enough. Shut your mouth." He lunged toward Emily, his cold eyes looking ready to crush what little strength she had left. I saw Emily's shoulders shrink, her eyes red with tears. My heart clenched. I stepped in front of my daughter, ready to do anything to protect her. In my mind, memories of Emily came flooding back. I remembered the time she called me, crying in despair. Each time she lost a child, the first, the second, the third, then the fourth, I felt her soul shatter a little more. Emily had once been such a gentle girl, dreaming of a home filled with laughter and family meals. But repeated pain had pushed her into the depths of depression. I had tried to stay close, even if only through long-distance calls. But never did I imagine the Carters, the family I once trusted, would treat my daughter this way. Mark, the son-in-law I once thought was a decent man, now showed his true face. An invisible abuser who tossed his wife out into the freezing cold, treating her like garbage. The rage in me surged to the point of madness. Through the window, I saw Michael standing still in the yard. His stern eyes and clenched fists made it clear he had heard and seen everything. I gave him a slight nod, signaling him not to step in yet. But inside, his presence was a spark of hope. I knew I wasn't alone. "I'm warning you, this is my house. Stay out of it, unless you want things to get even worse." He smirked, certain I would bow to the Carter family's power. I clenched my fists, my knuckles cracking, feeling a lifetime of resentment and fury explode in that moment. The air in the room was so thick that one spark would have been enough to make it blow. I stared into Mark's eyes, my voice low but each word sharp as a blade. "You think you can threaten me? You think you can keep tormenting my daughter without paying the price? You're wrong, Mark. I will not let this go." I turned to face the entire Carter family, from Richard with his cold face, to Susan with her fake smile, to Isabel with her contemptuous glare. "All of you," I said, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the room, "will pay for what you've done to Emily." The room sank into a terrifying silence, as if no air remained, only the heavy tension ready to explode at any moment. I placed my hand on Emily's thin, trembling shoulder beneath the shawl. My voice rang out, steady and firm, without a trace of doubt. "This is no longer a private matter. This is domestic abuse." My words fell like a stone into a still lake, sending shockwaves through the room. Susan still held her glass of wine, laughing scornfully, swirling it as if enjoying a show. "Abuse? We're just teaching her a lesson, Brenda. A wife needs to know her place. You should thank us for putting up with her this long." Mark stepped forward again. His eyes were bloodshot with alcohol and fury, his teeth grinding as he spat each word. "She fakes depression, fakes pain, just to do nothing. Nobody hits her. We're just sick of her uselessness." He stopped, staring straight at me, then smirked. "Teach your daughter better, Brenda. Nobody loses 4 children in a row. Maybe she did it on purpose." Those words were like a razor-sharp blade. They didn't just pierce my heart. They tore open Emily's wounds that had never healed. I heard my daughter's breath hitch, as if she had just been punched in the chest. 4 miscarriages. 4 times she called me, sobbing until her voice broke, telling me she had lost a child she never even got to hold. Each time, I could only clutch the phone from afar, helpless, trying to comfort her with hollow words. And now, Mark had the audacity to stand in front of me and say my daughter did it on purpose. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms, blood rushing to my face. My limit had been crossed. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My hands shook, but I quickly dialed the nearest police station. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice icy even as a storm raged inside me. "A report will be filed. You will answer to the law." I emphasized every word, carving them into the air so everyone understood I wasn't bluffing. Mark froze. The wine bottle slipped from his hand, hitting the wooden floor with a dry crack, red wine spreading across the carpet. He stared at me, panic flashing in his eyes, though he tried to fake arrogance. "You wouldn't dare," he shouted. but his voice trembled, as if he hadn't expected me to go this far. Richard, who had been sitting with his cold expression, stepped forward. He straightened his tie, his deep, gravelly voice carrying authority. Challenging, Brenda. I've spent my life in courtrooms, witnessing the worst of this world. You think one phone call of yours will make us afraid? He looked at me with razor-sharp eyes, a reminder that the Carter family would not be easily brought down. But I did not back down. I had seen my daughter shivering in the freezing cold, and nothing, not even Richard's power, could silence me. Isabel folded her arms, sneering. Go ahead and call if you want, Brenda. Let's see who the police will believe, some crazy old woman or a respected family like us. You think they'll take your side? She laughed cruelly, certain I would fail. Emily, still sitting on the sofa, tugged softly at my sleeve. Her voice trembled in a whisper. Mom, please don't do this. I just want peace. Her bloodshot eyes, filled with fear, seemed to beg me not to make things worse. I knew she feared the Carter family's revenge, but I also understood that if I stopped now, Emily would remain trapped in her misery forever. I squeezed her hand, trying to give her a bit of courage. You don't have to be afraid, I said softly but firmly. I'll protect you, I promise. I lifted Emily into my arms. The snow clinging to her coat fell onto the carpet like shards of a shattered dream. I didn't care about the Carter family's scornful looks or threats. All I knew was that I had to get my daughter out of that cruel cage where she had been imprisoned for far too long. As I turned toward the door, through the frosted glass, I saw Michael standing on the porch. His hand rested on his radio, his eyes blazing like fire, ready to act at any moment. I gave a slight nod, a signal that I was ready for the battle. Michael answered with a firm nod of his own. I walked on, never looking back. Behind me, I heard Susan shouting at the maid to clean up the spilled wine. I heard Mark slam his hand on the past table, cursing. Then, Richard's deep, angry voice rang out as he called someone. Those sounds pierced my back like arrows, but I no longer cared. I brought Emily to my small apartment near the National Training Center in Colorado, where I had lived for years as a coach. It had nothing luxurious, just one room with an old sofa, a modest kitchen corner, and a few family photos on the wall. But to me, it was safe. It was a place where I could shield my daughter from the Carter family's cruelty. I laid Emily on the bed, carefully wrapping her in blankets. Her body still trembled, even wrapped in my thick coat. I searched the closet for an old sweater, dressed her in it, and prepared a cup of hot chocolate, its sweet aroma filling the room. Drink, sweetheart, I whispered, placing the cup in her hands. But Emily only stared at it with empty eyes, as if she no longer believed she deserved even a little warmth. My phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. It was Michael. His steady voice came over the line. Mrs. Brenda, I've already filed the initial report at the station, but I don't think the Carters will sit quietly. They have influence, you know that. I'll be ready to testify if you need me. I heard the resolve in his voice, a quiet fire that would never go out. Michael, the student who once looked at me with bright eyes in the training hall, was now by my side in a different kind of battle. Help me prepare, Michael, I replied, my voice brief but filled with gratitude. This could be a long fight, he answered simply. I understand, Coach. I'll be here. The next morning, I took Emily to see a psychologist downtown doctor. Morris, an older woman with kind eyes, who welcomed us into her warm office. After speaking with Emily, she turned to me, her voice grave but compassionate. Your daughter is suffering from severe depression, Mrs. Brenda. 4 miscarriages, combined with the constant humiliation from her in-laws, have stripped her of all self-worth. She needs rest, treatment, and above all, to feel safe. The doctor's words pierced my heart. I had already known Emily was unwell, but hearing it confirmed by a professional was like another knife. I looked at my daughter curled up on the chair, her hands clenched tight, and blamed myself for not being there sooner. That afternoon, Michael stopped by the apartment. He was in plain clothes now, no police uniform. In his hands was a bag of fruit and a few old cookbooks. He placed them in front of Emily, hesitated, then said, "I know you love cooking. I thought if you start again with something small, like pudding or noodle soup, you might feel a little better." His voice was gentle, but worry shone in his eyes. Emily lowered her head, clutching her sweater, and whispered, "Thank you, but I don't think I can do anything anymore." Her words stabbed me like needles. Michael's expression darkened with sadness, but he didn't press her. He simply sat quietly. He left the fruit on the table, then turned to me. "Mrs. Brenda, whatever you need, just tell me. I'll help." That night, when Emily was asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen under the dim yellow light, a stack of papers in front of me. Suddenly, I heard a noise outside and saw a thick envelope push through the door, silent as an invisible threat. I opened it. Inside was a scrawled note. "Don't go against the Carter family, or you'll end up miserable like your daughter. Surrender." My blood boiled. I crumpled the paper tightly and hurled it into the trash. The dry thud of the paper hitting the bin shattered the silence. That threat didn't frighten me. On the contrary, it only fueled my resolve. They thought I would back down? They were wrong. That very night, I began gathering every piece of paperwork, money transfers I had sent to Emily over the years, text messages with loving notes. All of it was proof that I had always been there for her, even knowing most of that money had been wasted by Mark and his family. Each paper reminded me of the times Emily had called, her voice trembling as she said she wanted to buy something small for the household, only for Mark to dismiss her with, "It's not necessary." I gripped the pen so tightly it almost snapped. I had trusted Mark. I thought he would take care of my daughter. But in his eyes, Emily was nothing more than a tool. And when she lost her value, he cast her aside without hesitation. At midnight, Emily woke up, her shaky legs carrying her out of bed. She found me sitting there among piles of papers, my eyes tired but burning with determination. She whispered weakly, "Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared they'll hurt you." I looked up, into her bloodshot eyes, and it felt like my heart was being crushed. I stood, walked over, and wrapped her in my arms, feeling her frail body trembling against me. "You don't have to be afraid," I said, my voice steady though my heart was in chaos. "From now on, I will be the one to protect you. I promise." I led Emily back to bed and sat beside her until she drifted off to sleep. But I couldn't close my eyes. I returned to the kitchen table, kept organizing the papers, and wrote down a list of things I needed to do. I called an old lawyer who had once helped me during a case involving the taekwondo team. He promised to review it. But he also warned me. "The Carter family has a lot of influence in Denver, Mrs. Brenda. They know many people in the courts. You need to prepare yourself for a long battle." I replied simply, "I know, but I won't stop." Every night, under the dim light in my small apartment, I turned page after page bank receipts, medical reports for Emily. Those cold numbers were both proof of my love for her and painful reminders of everything she had endured. Then the first day of trial arrived. I, Brenda, felt like I was stepping onto a taekwondo mat. Emily and I entered the county court in Denver, Colorado. The morning cold cut straight through our coats. I held my daughter's hand, feeling her icy, trembling fingers in my palm. Her eyes were bloodshot, the dark circles under them proof of countless sleepless nights. She kept her head down, as if to avoid everyone's eyes. I kept my back straight, trying to be her pillar, even though inside I was just as anxious. "I'm here," I whispered, squeezing her hand gently. She squeezed back weakly, but in her empty eyes, I could see she had already given up long ago. Inside the courtroom, the Carter family was already seated. Mark wore a gray suit, looking every bit the confident lawyer. Before the session began, he adjusted his tie and shot us a look full of disdain. Next to him was Richard, moving slowly but with eyes sharp as knives. He smiled with certainty, as if the outcome was already his. On the family bench, Susan and Isabel sat in their elegant clothes, leaning in to whisper to each other, occasionally throwing contemptuous glances our way. I felt the hostility in every gesture, but I forced myself to stay calm, reminding myself that today wasn't just my battle, it was Emily's. Michael was there too, sitting in the audience in his police uniform, his eyes fixed on us. He gave me a small nod, his gaze steady, like a promise that he would never abandon us. His presence made me feel less alone, like I had an ally in the middle of this war. In my heart, I silently thanked him for being there since that horrific Christmas Eve. All the way to today. The trial began. My lawyer, Dr. Johnson, stood and presented each piece of evidence clearly. He showed the transfer slips, proving I had sent Emily money for years, proof that I had always supported my daughter, even though much of that money had ended up in Mark's hands. He also presented Emily's medical records, with detailed notes from her, the psychologist, about her depression. After 4 miscarriages, compounded by constant humiliation from her in-laws, Emily had been devastated, not just physically, but emotionally. Dr. Johnson's voice carried deep emotion. They treated her like a stranger in her own home. I looked at Emily. Her head was bowed low, her hands clenched tightly together, as if trying to contain all her pain. I wanted to run and hold her, but I knew I had to stay firm, to let the lawyer do his job. Then the Carter family's young attorneys stood, and I began to feel the shadow of injustice spreading across the room. One of them, in a slick black suit, spoke sharply. "Emily only pretends to be ill to get pampered. The Carter family gave her everything: a home, food, every necessity. Yet she gave nothing in return. She failed to fulfill her duty as a wife." Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Pretending? Pampered? My blood boiled. They called their witness Martha, the Carters' former maid. She stepped up to the stand, eyes avoiding mine, her voice shaky. But then she declared, "Mrs. Emily was often very lazy. She stayed in her room all day, neglecting the housework. I had to do everything, from cooking to cleaning." Emily, the daughter who once carefully prepared every meal, who used to bake pudding to please the whole family, was now being called lazy? I shot up from my seat, unable to hold it in any longer. "You're lying. Emily was never like that." But the middle-aged judge, his face stern, slammed his gavel hard. "Silence. Keep order. This is a court of law." I sat down, my heart pounding, as if I couldn't catch my breath. When I glanced at Richard, I saw him give a small, arrogant smile, then subtly nod at the judge. An invisible thread between them made me shiver. Something was clearly wrong. Emily sat curled up, her trembling hands gripping the chair. I saw Michael in the back row, his jaw clenched, fists tight, as if he was fighting to hold back his anger. Dr. Johnson pressed on, his voice steady. "We present an important piece of evidence, the Christmas Eve recording, where you can clearly hear the insults and emotional abuse that the Carter family inflicted on Emily. He played the recording Michael had secretly captured. Mark's voice rang out, cold and cruel. She only pretends to be depressed to avoid responsibility. Then Susan's sharp voice. A woman who can't bear children, even with every comfort, has no value at all. Next was Isabel's mocking tone. She can't even have kids. The courtroom sank into silence. Only hushed whispers filled the air. I looked at Emily, seeing her shrink into herself, as though each word pierced her heart all over again. But immediately, the Carters' lawyer stood to object. This recording is illegal. It was made without the consent of the involved parties. This is a violation of privacy rights. The judge nodded, his voice dry and firm. The recording is not admissible as evidence. It felt like the ground fell out from under me. The clearest proof of their cruelty had been dismissed because of a legal loophole. The room erupted in whispers. Many looked shocked. Some shook their heads in disbelief. I looked at Michael, saw his head bowed, his fists trembling on his knees. Emily buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back tears. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm the judge's bench and demand justice. But I knew, in that courtroom, justice didn't belong to us. Richard still sat there, his expression calm yet arrogant, as if he had known the outcome all along. I squeezed Emily's hand, trying to give her strength, even as I felt myself unraveling inside. After a week of hearings, days stretched tight with endless tension, the day of judgment finally came. I sat in the Denver County courtroom, gripping Emily's cold, trembling hand. All week, I had fought to stay strong, but each night in our small apartment, despair and helplessness weighed heavy on me. Emily sat beside me, her eyes red from sleepless nights, her face pale, drained of life. I held her hand tighter, trying to give her some courage, though I too was shaking. In front of us, Mark walked in with arrogant strides, adjusting his tie as if it were any other day. His mother, Susan, straightened her dress and sat tall. Her crimson lips curved in a confident smile, certain of victory. Isabel, in her flashy outfit, threw us a look of pure disdain. Richard stood behind Mark, radiating authority, his cold eyes reminding everyone that the Carter family controlled it all. Michael sat in the gallery, still in his police uniform, his eyes steady but shadowed with worry. He gave me a small nod, a silent promise. He would be there no matter what. I returned the look with quiet gratitude, comforted by his presence. But when the judge, a middle-aged man with a blank face, entered, a chill ran down my spine. The air grew heavy, as though everyone already knew the verdict had been decided. His voice rang out, dry and unyielding. The court grants the petition for divorce between the plaintiff, Emily Parker, and the defendant, Mark Carter. Those words lit a spark of hope in me. Emily burst into tears, silent streams rolling down her cheeks. I squeezed her hand, urging her to stay calm and keep listening. Divorce. That was what I wanted for Emily, for her to finally escape the Carters' cruel cage. But I knew the ruling wasn't over. The judge continued, his voice flat, as though reading from a report. However, the court does not recognize the claims of domestic abuse due to insufficient admissible evidence. Regarding the marital assets, since Mark Carter contributed more to maintaining the marriage, the majority of shared property will remain with him. The words slammed into my chest like a hammer. No recognition of abuse. Insufficient evidence. I remembered the Christmas Eve recording the vile words from Mark, Susan, and Isabel, but it had been dismissed on a technicality. I thought of the medical records, the bank receipts, all twisted by the Carters' legal team into weapons against us. And I understood. Richard, with his history as a judge and his deep ties in the legal system, had arranged everything. I looked at him, saw him tilt his head slightly, that arrogant smile still on his lips. It was all orchestrated. Emily and I were nothing more than pawns on their chessboard. I couldn't hold it back any longer. I shot to my feet, my voice breaking with anger and pain. "You are so unfair. This is not justice." My scream echoed through the courtroom, silencing everyone. Emily clutched my hand, her eyes wide with fear, but I didn't stop. "Did you see how they treated my daughter? Did you hear what she's endured? And now you dare say there was no abuse? You dare to strip her of everything?" A guard approached, his voice firm. "Ma'am, please sit down. If not, I'll have to escort you out." I looked at him, then at the judge. But he just sat there with a blank face, as if my words carried no weight at all. I sat down, my hands trembling, feeling like the whole world was collapsing beneath me. Mark turned, looked straight at me, and sneered. He adjusted his tie, acting as if he had just won a great victory. Susan and Isabel whispered to each other, giggling loudly enough for me to hear. That laughter cut into my heart like a knife. Richard sat there calmly, as if this was just another case he had manipulated. I looked at each of them, hot blood surging through my veins. They had not only stolen justice from Emily, but also shattered my faith in the very system I once believed in. Emily buried her face in her hands, her whole body trembling. Her muffled sobs tore my soul apart. I wanted to hold her, to promise her everything would be okay, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. The judge's words still echoed in my mind, like a sentence handed down not only to Emily, but to me as well. Michael, sitting in the back row, suddenly leapt to his feet. His eyes locked on the Carter family, veins bulging on his arms, fists clenched so tightly they looked ready to explode. I quickly motioned for him to stay calm, even though inside me I wanted to scream, to smash everything in that courtroom. The judge slammed the gavel, his voice booming. "This court is adjourned. Everyone may leave." That sound was like a period at the end of a sentence, but for me, it was only the beginning of a new kind of pain. People began to rise, conversations filling the room, papers shuffling. But I stayed where I was, clutching Emily tightly in my arms. Her shoulders shook with every sob, and the sound of her crying shredded my heart. Mark walked slowly toward me, the arrogant stride of a man who thought he had won. He leaned down, whispering in my ear, his voice dripping with mockery. "See, Brenda? I told you. Never go against me. You're nothing but a useless old woman." He sneered, his eyes glittering with triumph, then turned away, as if Emily and I weren't even worth his attention. His words poured gasoline on the fire already raging inside me. Blood rushed to my head, my fists clenched so tight the veins bulged. My whole body tensed like a bow ready to snap. I wanted nothing more than to lunge at him, to drive my fist into that smug face, to make him feel even a fraction of what he had done to my daughter. After years of Taekwondo, I had learned self-control. But in that moment, every barrier within me crumbled. I stepped forward, my heart pounding wildly. I was ready to do something I knew I'd regret. But just then, Michael suddenly stepped in front of me, blocking my path. His eyes blazed with fury, his lips pressed tight, his fists clenched as if he was about to smash Mark himself. I saw in him the same rage. I carried the unbearable injustice that no one could contain. The courtroom stirred, whispers rising. "They're going to fight." A guard rushed forward. A few people raised their phones. Camera flashes burst, capturing the scene. In the corner, a reporter lifted his camera, eyes gleaming like he'd just stumbled upon a scandal. Mark turned when he saw Michael. For a split second, fear flickered in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with defiance. He sneered coldly and spat out, "If you lay a hand on me, I'll ruin you. Who do you think you are? Just a third-rate guard." He stepped closer, deliberately provoking. convinced Michael wouldn't dare strike. I saw Michael's fist trembling, his breathing ragged, his eyes burning red. In that instant, I knew he might do something he could never take back. Suddenly, Emily tore herself free from me, rushing forward to grab Michael's arm, clinging to him as tears streamed down her face. She sobbed, "No, please, don't do it. I don't want Mom, and I don't want you to become violent like him. I just want peace. I just want to keep living." Her cries ripped through the air, freezing the room in silence. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks, her frail hands gripping Michael's arm like a drowning person clinging to the last lifeline. Michael froze, his breath heavy, the fire in his eyes slowly dimming. His fist still trembled, clenched for several seconds, before lowering bit by bit. He bowed his head, his lips pressed tight, fighting to control the fury burning inside. The click of cameras sounded loud and sharp. Flashes went off repeatedly, capturing the image of Emily sobbing in Michael's arms, while across from them stood Mark, smirking with smug arrogance. Some in the room, strangers to us, burst into tears. Quiet sobs echoed, as though Emily's pain had pierced their souls. I glanced around and saw an older woman wiping her eyes, a middle-aged man shaking his head with sorrow. But the Carter family remained unmoved. Susan and Isabel whispered to each other, their lips curled into cruel smiles. Richard, with his commanding presence, gave a slight nod, as if everything was still under his control. The judge slammed the gavel, his cold voice echoing, "Order. If there's any more disturbance, I will have the guards escort everyone out." The gavel struck like a bell, dragging everyone back to reality. I rushed to hold Emily tight. She was still sobbing, her body trembling in my arms like a lost child. Michael stood beside us, head bowed, lips pressed tight, looking as though he blamed himself for not being able to do more. I placed my hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently, trying to tell him I understood and was grateful he was here. Mark straightened his tie and walked away with the swagger of a victor. Susan and Isabel followed behind, their cold laughter echoing like knives stabbing into my chest. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving only me, Emily, and Michael, three people bound by the same bitter pain lodged in our throats. I held Emily close, feeling her weak breath on my shoulder. "Mom," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want to fight anymore. I'm so tired. Can we just go home?" Those words tore my heart apart. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that I would keep fighting, but my throat closed up, and I couldn't speak. I guided Emily out of the courtroom, with Michael walking silently beside us, his steady eyes following us all the way down the courthouse hallway. The faint sunlight of Denver streamed through the windows, but it wasn't enough to warm my heart. I knew today's verdict wasn't just a defeat. It was a declaration of war. The Carter family might have won in court, but I would never let them win in Emily's life. I looked at my daughter and saw, in her red, tear-swollen eyes, a faint glimmer of light, a fragile hope. For that light, I swore I would never give up. In the days after the trial, Denver seemed to rumble with an undercurrent. Local newspapers began reporting, with headlines splashed across the front page. "The Carter trial, justice has been bought." I read those words, my heart pounding. They felt like the voice of the very pain Emily and I had endured. On social media, the video of Emily clinging to Michael in the courtroom spread rapidly. The image of my daughter, eyes swollen from crying, pleading with Michael not to become violent, pierced the hearts of thousands. Comments overflowed with outrage. "The Carter family thinks they can manipulate everything. Emily deserves a better life than this." Sitting in our small apartment, reading those words, I felt a measure of comfort. The court may have turned its back on us, but the voice of the community had begun to stand with Emily. The Carter family, though victorious on paper, began to pay the price for that victory. I heard whispers from Richard's former colleagues, murmurs about how he had abused his power to manipulate justice. Mark was branded the lawyer of injustice, becoming the target of scorn on online forums. The reputation the Carters once held with such pride now wavered like a sandcastle being washed away by the tide. I didn't feel joy in their downfall, but I did feel a small measure of justice, not from the courts, but from the voice of the people. I brought Emily to live with me in our small apartment, where only the warm yellow light and family photos on the wall kept us company. Every morning, I woke early to make her breakfast. Sometimes it was oatmeal with ham, other times, just scrambled eggs with toast. Emily sat at the table, holding a hot cup of coffee, staring out the window at the pale sunlight streaming over Denver's rooftops. There were moments when tears silently rolled down her cheeks like raindrops. But I knew, slowly, Emily was healing. Each day she spoke a little more, and her eyes were no longer as empty as before. I never pushed her. I just stayed by her side, ready to shield her from every storm. Michael also became an important part of our lives. He often stopped by sometimes with a small bouquet of flowers, other times with pastries from the nearby bakery. Every time he appeared, I saw Emily's eyes light up, as if his presence was medicine for her soul. One afternoon, Michael, looking slightly nervous, handed Emily a small box. Inside was a keychain shaped like a taekwondo uniform, the symbol I had once taught him, and so many of my students. "You don't have to be strong right away," Michael said gently but firmly. "But you can start again, slowly, the way Coach Brenda once did." Emily held the keychain, her eyes glistening. She bit her lip, fighting back tears, and whispered, "Thank you." I watched from a distance, relief swelling in my chest as if a heavy burden had finally lifted. For years, Emily had been belittled, called useless. Now, at last, someone saw her true worth, loved her not for what she could do, but simply for who she was. Another evening, as the sunset painted our apartment in golden light, Emily sat across from Michael on the sofa. Her head bowed, fingers twisting the hem of her sweater, her voice trembling. "Michael, maybe I'll never be able to have children. If that disappoints you, then—" She trailed off, afraid those words would shatter everything. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, but my heart felt like it stopped, waiting for his answer. Michael smiled gently yet firmly. Took Emily's hand, looked straight into her eyes. "Just you alone is already a family to me." Those words were like a warm breeze that chased away the last chill in my heart. I quietly turned away, letting the tears flow, overflowing with a gratitude I couldn't put into words. By Easter, I took Emily for a walk through downtown Denver, just like when she was little, her hand in mine. As we strolled through the glowing streets, that day the square was full of life. Children's laughter rang out. The scent of roasted chestnuts filled the air. Emily wore a light sweater, her hair tied back, and for the first time in months, I saw her smile, a radiant smile, as bright as spring sunlight. "Mom, I miss these days," she whispered. "I miss when you taught me how to make pudding, when you told me about your taekwondo matches." I squeezed her hand. "I miss them too, sweetheart. And I'll always be here to make new memories with you." We sat on a wooden bench, watching children run around the fountain, and suddenly, I realized a simple yet profound truth. Justice in a courtroom can be twisted, bought with power and money. But the justice of the heart, love, respect, and resilience cannot be touched by anyone. Emily, though scarred by loss, was slowly finding her way back to herself. And I, a mother who once thought she was powerless, now understood that my greatest strength was not in the kicks I had mastered on the mat, but in the love I carried for my daughter. Michael appeared again, carrying a bag of fresh pastries. He sat beside Emily, handed her one, and the two of them laughed and talked like lifelong friends. I watched them, my heart brimming with hope. Emily may never forget the wounds left by the Carter family, but she was learning to move forward, to love herself, and to open her heart to those who truly valued her. As for me, though 62 years old and having fought many battles in my life, I knew that this one for Emily's happiness was the most meaningful of all. This story is fictional, but inspired by real events. Names and places have been changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't share this to judge, but in the hope that someone suffering in their own home might find understanding here. I'd love to know. If you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep a fragile peace? Or would you find the courage to stand up and reclaim your voice? I want to hear your thoughts, because every story can be a candle lighting the way for someone else. And if today's story gave you something to reflect on, I invite you to stay with this channel so we can keep sharing, listening, and learning together from stories like this, because who knows, today's story might just be the light for someone's tomorrow. God always blesses, and I believe that courage will lead us toward brighter days. On the final screen, I'll leave you with two of the channel's most loved stories. I'm certain they'll surprise you.